I know we've talked about the NIH lawsuit a lot, but I must talk about it a little bit more because I represent the Research Triangle area in North Carolina. And so many of the research institutions in my area, and thank you, Attorney General Campbell, for pointing out, so many of the other economic engines of the Research Triangle are reliant on this NIH funding. But we can't forget the human face. As I was sitting in this hearing, I heard from a constituent who wanted to know, when's my trial going to start again? I'm sick. I'm worried. And as we all know, when you guys get these amazing injunctions, you have to show both that the Trump administration has violated the law, likelihood of success on the merits, and you have to show irreparable harm. And just this woman who I got a message from here is a demonstration of this irreparable harm. So I want to congratulate you, Attorney General Campbell, on getting this far and actually getting a permanent injunction. But what I've heard from many of the folks in the biomedical sphere in my area is they're afraid that the Trump administration will slow walk the remedy, much as we saw in Brown versus Board of Education, with all deliberate speed. And then that will mean that these life-saving drugs and these trials will be permanently gone because you can't get people back. You can't get the data back. So could you tell me how you are working to get this particular order enforced as quickly as possible, what the state of the appeal is, and then when you're finished, for anybody else who wants to talk about how we are going to get this justice as quickly as we can.
And I do invite my colleagues to chime in, particularly on NIH and how it's affecting them in their respective states, because all have stories of life and death, frankly. Hence why we are collective in our efforts to protect all funding related to NIH. This victory most recently in NIH 2 is a big deal. And what we're finding, I think, which is true for all federal funding cases where we are winning decisions to protect this funding, either to turn it back on or to stop the administration from turning it off, is that if we need to, we can go back into court with the judge who issued the very order and have them be the plater, the stakeholder to push the administration to do what they are calling them to do with respect to that order. I would say in many of our funding cases, we are indeed, and I can say here, winning because the funding has been turned on or was never turned off in the first place because of some of our victories, not just for NIH. Sometimes we have to equip people with the very order itself to be able to share that with various folks to get funding turned back on, seeing in the context of even my librarians who I just saw recently. And at the same time, trying to also remind the courts, once we've won an order, that there is still risk. So for example, I'm using not to discount NIH, but in the library context where we won a preliminary injunction immediately to protect access to cultural institutions and to libraries, I did have some librarians say they still had to cut certain services because of the chaos and confusion. If there is an appeal, for example, they don't know how to respond to that chaos and confusion, even though we won the PI. So it's our ability or our opportunity to continue to go back into the court to remind judges how they might have to be even more creative in crafting a remedy and response. And then, of course, to push the administration to respond to an order. But so far, we have been winning, but it will always come with real harm. This is why elections matter.
I can chime in. I joined in co-leading in NIH, and like many of these actions, it's a personal one to me. My father was a physician who I lost to prostate cancer, and the practice of medicine has evolved since the time he practiced because of research. And I myself was later diagnosed with the same, and I was very public about it and have given advice since to people who were diagnosed subsequent to me. What I've learned in that process is the science has changed. It has evolved. The science of diagnosis, the science of treatment, and so my experience from just 9 years ago is a bit different than somebody who may be diagnosed today, either in diagnosis or in treatment. And that's a good thing. And we should continue to advance in research. And so when we decided to take action on this, it's a very personal one to me. And as A.G. Campbell said earlier in her initial remarks, this does not just impact us in blue states, right? There are research institutions in the red states that are impacted as well. And I would beg upon my colleagues who serve as AGs on the other side of the aisle to join us in this fight, because their institutions would otherwise suffer as well.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very